Rob, big story over the weekend. Deion Sanders, who done such a great job at Jackson State. They are undefeated. They won the SWAC conference and beat Southern in the championship on Saturday. Rob, my grandparents went to Southern University in Baton Rouge. It's HBCU in Baton Rouge. Several cousins who went there as well. And my grandfather, believe it or not, was the reason that they had night school at Southern.
Really?
Because he went to LSU to go to night school, and they wouldn't let him because he's black. And so they created a separate but equal, right, supposedly.
Oh, yeah.
So they created an equal opportunity at the local HBCU, Southern.
So a night school, huh?
There. Yep.
That's interesting. Chris, by the way, you talked about Deion winning the SWAC. You know what that stands for? SWAC?
Southwest Athletic Conference?
No. Somewhere around Colorado. I just want you to know that.
That's why I got mad when they said he's not SWAC.
Right. Yes.
So that's the big deal, Rob. He's leaving Jackson State to go to Colorado, which, yeah, they're bad now. What were they, 1-11 this year in
Chris,
the Pac-12?
that's when they hire new coaches, is when teams are bad.
Right.
I just hate to break it to people. And
remember 20
back.
years ago they won, it was roughly 25 years ago or something, they won the national championship with Bill McCartney, late 90s, I believe it was, mid-90s, late 90s. But yeah, I mean, that's a program where if he does, if he turned it around, they'd be in the mix, right? It's not like you're going somewhere where you got no
Look
shot.
at the recruits he got to go to Jackson State.
Right. Right.
Now you're in the Pac-12, right?
No, if he does as good a job, then they're going to be good. And they're going to be a national.
And I know people are pushing back. Oh, he's a sellout. He's leaving the HBCU.
Well, that's the pushback. Yeah, some African Americans are pushing back. Here's Deion on that, Rob.
The thing that alarms me the most is just because I'm leaving Jackson, they think that I'm leaving African Americans. I don't know if you noticed or not, but I'm black. I can never leave who I am and what I am and how I am and how I go about being that. So it is still my task to look in that locker room and see 65 to 70% of African American men trying to help them get to the next level, as well as all the others. My calling is for young men, young women, and people of all walks of life, all social climates, and all ethnicities. That's my calling. My calling is not built on a location. It's built on a destination. Now that was good. You're supposed to clap for that. That was good. You give some of my good stuff. We just getting started. I already went in the bag, baby. Let's go.
What was that, Rob?
I said, I hope those weren't reporters clapping. You know what I mean?
Well, that was the press conference, but it was more than reporters.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But yeah, you're right.
Reporters should
What are your thoughts on this, Rob?
I have no issue with this. People should look at Chris. He came to Jackson State. He's done a fantastic job. He built that program up. Got sponsors to build better facilities for that school. And he set up another coach, Chris, black coach, to come in and replace him and have something to work with. He doesn't have to stay there his whole life or only coach HBCUs. If there was another opportunity that was great at an HBCU, then fine. But to make him feel like he's done something wrong because he went, got an opportunity, built on it, recruited some great players, got money, delivered to the school, Chris, and built something down there that somebody else can take and run with. He has nothing to be ashamed of or feel funny or feel like he sold out or whatever. I think people have missed the boat here with Deion.
Yeah, one thing that I think one of the worst things you can be is a hypocrite. And so I am not going to be a hypocrite and sit here and rip Deion Sanders for leaving a black institution to go work at a white institution. Because I worked at the New York Times, ESPN, and Fox Sports. I haven't worked at the Amsterdam News and Black Entertainment
Or BET,
Television.
that's right, Chris. Where was your show on BET?
Right. And so I do not have a problem with him leaving and going there to work, a job as a football coach. What I will say is this. If I had to have one criticism of Deion, it would be this. Deion, to a large degree, made it a crusade. When he went to Jackson State and as he was coaching there, he largely made it about resurrecting HBCUs. He even said, he was interviewed on 60 Minutes, Rob. He said, he said, I truly believe with all my heart and soul that God called me. He said, called me collect, and I had to accept the charges. He said that him getting the job at Jackson State 3 months after George Floyd, the George Floyd murder, was relevant because a lot of folks sit back with Twitter fingers and talk about what they're going to do. These are direct quotes. And I wanted to go do it. The interviewer said, do what? He said, change lives, change the perspective of HBCU football, make everyone step up to the plate and do right by these kids. And then he recruited, to some degree, he recruited kids on the notion of, hey, come and change the perspective. Like Travis Hunter, remember the top player who left, was going to commit to Florida State and left them and committed to Jackson State. He said that Deion sold him on how big of an impact he could make at an HBCU and shining the light on our people and on HBCUs. So if that is indeed, that's more than just a job. That's making it sound like it's a calling. Now, was it only a calling for 2 or 3 years? Maybe. But that is where I think, I would say, man, you a football coach. Now, obviously, when you're at Jackson State and the overwhelming majority, because, HBCUs aren't just for black students anymore. You have Hispanics, you have white students there. I had a friend that went to Tennessee State. I think Tennessee State, which is an HBCU, is now 30% white. So it's not just black students, but it's a black institution run by African Americans and things like that. A lot of African Americans in powerful positions. And I think that's necessary. So my thing is just, when you make it that type of crusade about race, you say God called you there, that's why I would say, well, that makes it a little more. That, to me, if you just want, and I think Deion just wants to be a football coach, but then it's a football coach. It's a job. Don't make it about all this other stuff. And I get it. Wherever you're at, when you're at Jackson State, you're going to want to influence the kids. Most of them will be African American. At Colorado, you're going to want to influence the kids of all races. But that would be my one criticism, Rob. Just, he kind of made it about race. He made it this type of crusade to, really lift up HBCUs and how you don't have to go to the big white institution, if you're one of the top players in the country. And that's where I think can be legitimate criticism.
Yeah, I think that you can go into a situation, Chris, want to make a change. I think all of the stuff that he did was positive to HBCUs and what he was able to do. But people they change their minds and they move on and they get into other situations. That doesn't mean that he, even during those terms when he wanted to do and change the way people looked at HBCUs, he didn't say, I'm going to be here until I drop dead and I'll never leave or any spiel like that to make you believe that this was permanent. So I hear your point. I think it's a valid one, but these things happen where people evolve and move on, or where he feels like, I've done a lot here. Maybe I can get to the next level of a Colorado or even another level of that and really have an impact to even more players. The HBC thing, Chris, I give him credit. I don't know if I thought he was going to be a lifer at an HBCU. So and there aren't that many other places to go from there. Where are you going? To Southern? Is that the biggest HBCU? Howard?
No. I mean, it's big in terms of football program.
Yeah.
He made Jackson State the biggest. I think Alabama State was pretty tough. No, I mean, the only thing left for him to do in the HBCU sports world would be to continue to bring in corporate sponsors. He brought Pepsi, built their new practice facility. It would be to continue to bring in corporate sponsors, continue to get some of the top recruits. And I mean, ideally, it would be if your program's that good, it could move up to the Division 1A level versus Division 1AA or FBS or FCS. I always get them mixed up, but the top level. And show that these schools can compete with the predominantly white institutions, as they call them. I think another factor is this, Rob. Money. I mean, let's keep it real. Deion Sanders was making $500,000 at Jackson State,
and now he's going to make $5 million.
$5 million. But here's the thing: people look at Deion. I have no idea where his financial situation is at. I hope he's wealthy. He should be. But Rob, Deion Sanders, according to SpotRack.com, he played 14 seasons in the NFL. Guess how much money he made?
$30 million.
$33 million.
Chris, people weren't making that kind of money.
This is the first,
you know what, 33 million?
15 years or so, right? Where guys are making the type of money where it's like, okay, you're set for your generation.
And Chris, think about this: $33 million. The government takes half of that, so you're talking about $16 million. Just say roughly
$17 million.
Right.
You're young. That's the thing people need to. I should say people should look at when they look at the athletes, Rob. Yes, they make a boatload of money, the superstars. But that money, I mean, their career is going to be done when they're 35 years old. And that money is supposed to be, if ideally, for the rest of your life.
And a lot of people, Chris, they don't. And you know this. I don't know, what is it? 3 out of 4, half of the NFL players go bankrupt. 3-4 years out of the league. Not anymore. Not the big players, but a lot of guys weren't able to, hold on to their money. Let me say this too. Yep. Deion did tell 60 Minutes last month that he would be a fool not to consider a Power 5 job if it was offered to him, and it was.
He
offered
made it very clear. He said he'd have to look at it.
Right.
So my thing, if you make it, if it's it's a job. You're going to a job that pays you more. That's going to give you more exposure, and obviously a lot of your players are going to be African American and all that. Fine. I'm just saying, when you make it about a calling or a crusade, that's different. Don't make it about that. Rob, I got the King Movement organization. To my knowledge, the King Movement organization is the only national Christian men's ministry that is run by African Americans. To my knowledge. And I've looked it up. That's important to me because I think we need Black-owned, Black-run institutions. And so if I'm making that a calling, if you will, and then I wouldn't go work for another Promise Keepers or somebody that's going to pay me more money just because it's not about money. This is more of a calling to me. And specifically because wanting it to be Black-owned and Black-run too. And so when you start talking that way, then people are going to look at it differently. But if it's like, this is my job, I love what I'm doing, but it's a job, then leave it at that. Don't make it something bigger than it really is.